Hi, my name is Andrew Greenfield, and today with Shawshank, I'm going to show you how to build a far more cyber-resilient infrastructure, either on-premise or on the cloud. And we're going to focus on the networking. That's right, on screen you'll see our friends at Broadcom and Brocade, 2 Gen 7 switches, and I would argue you need to protect these as much as you protect anything else against cyber attacks and being able to resist brute force attacks, as well as make sure they're not hacked or compromised. So remember, every piece of data goes through your switches, and it's critical. Fiber optic, copper, or whatever you want to look at. The bad guys don't get access to it, and they don't care how they get access. So please, let's dive deeper into it. Now, Shawshank is in the upper left. He's written numerous red books, red papers, and videos about safeguarded copy and cyber resilience. He works with me for the last year. He's been a great guy. And then there's myself down in the lower right. I am a global storage and security engineer. Feel free to reach out to either one of us for more detailed dives. And all of this is done in IBM Poughkeepsie Labs, but we couldn't have done it without our friends at Broadcom. That's right. Van Tran, Marcus Sordahl, as well as Brian Larson each have numerous social media presences for technical journals on NVMe, on virtual disks, as well as everything about Broadcom and Brocade switches. Feel free to take a look at their stuff. We couldn't have done this without them. Now let's take a look at the solution. We're going to go in the demo first, and then we'll go in the setup. What we're preventing now is showing how an attacker can try to get into a switch, and the switch itself will report those events to IBM Security's QRadar, and then QRadar will take events and then do something intelligent with it and block that very attacker surgically. It's all through syslog. We'll show this all live, but I want you to see how it works first, and then we'll go into the setup. And this is all using the Brocade FOSS operating system, using the IP filter command. Now we'll take a look at this. You can look at any different type of workflow and teach QRadar how to then take intelligent actions. We're just looking at failed login attempts. And so once those happen within a certain time frame, QRadar then takes actions and updates the switch to prevent any further attacks, as well as doing other stuff downstream to other security groups. We're using the IP filter command, which is part of the FOSS. And as you can see from the steps here, we're going to be updating the policy with a particular IP address. So that way we're surgically blocking that particular IP address or that attacker without affecting the rest of the operation of the switch. How we're doing this? Syslog. I would argue that you should use Syslog for all of your devices, from VMware, tapes, applications, databases, switches, storage, to report to a secure incident event monitoring or SIEM system so they can then do intelligent actions. And here's what it looks like. Let's go right now into the demo of the solution. In the upper right, you'll see the CLI screen where I'm actually going to log into the switch, and this time I'm going to not use the right password. And on the bottom, you can actually see QRadar. So you can see that I've logged in before, no problem. It's actually worked quite nicely, and now I'm about to break it, or in this case, show off how QRadar will take intelligent actions with the FOSS to block me. So I'm now putting in the wrong password a whole bunch of times. You'll see those failed logins, along with a couple successful logins because of Shawshank with me at the same time, just to show that we can be surgical about all this. Now take a look, the command on the console. This is where QRadar says, wait a second here. This isn't looking so good. I'm actually going to block that person and update the IP filter. So notice where it says here on IP filter, and let's go into a little bit of a deeper dive about that. I can do that by going into what's called the DSM editor inside QRadar. So we're going to dive in deeper now on the demo about how and why what just happened. So as you can see, this is a FOSS message where I actually said, okay, this IP filter, I'm going to update it. And it can take a look at all those particular messages, and it parsed and mapped it properly. So this is all from syslog. We're going to go into a little bit more of the detail of the setup next, but this is the actual command that was updated that actually blocked me from getting into the switch. Now, let's look a little bit deeper into the switch as part of our demo to show off the policy that we just updated so you can see how surgical it was. I'm going to bring up that IP filter that we just updated and take a look. Notice the name, QR with the unique number, and my IP address. That's right, the 9.211. And I'll show you that in just a second on my client side to prove that it's exactly me. But there it is, the deny. So surgically speaking, I've updated this switch now to block that particular VPN, and I'll bring that up in a little bit. You can actually see that I've brought this up a bunch of different times as part of tests and we call these offenses. So you can actually see where we've done this before inside QRadar in preparation for this video. So you can actually use this as an on-running tally. And as part of this, you wanted to actually verify that I'm actually using that IP address. There it is, live. There's my Cisco AnyConnect trying to get in to the IBM network and proving that there's the IP address. Let's get into the setup now of how to do the Brocade with QRadar. So the first things first is I actually have to set up a public key. Now the key is important because we need to make sure that the switch can talk to QRadar as well as QRadar taking actions back on the switch. So we have syslog, which is taking care of all the outbound messages from the switch into QRadar. That's great. But what we're doing right now is telling QRadar how it can get back into the switch using a public and private key. This is part of SSH and CLI. So you can see the IP address for QRadar here, and I'm actually putting in the public private key so that the switch and QRadar can trust each other from a command standpoint rather than just a simple message standpoint. Now that that's done, let's go into QRadar so we can set up it properly. When you go into QRadar, you can see a lot of log events from many different devices. I need to filter that, so I'm actually going to switch right now to either source IP or source or destination IP so I can actually filter just for my particular switch. Once I put in the switch IP, I then add the filter so that I can only see the messages relating to that particular switch. Now let's take a look at what it looks like from a message standpoint inside QRadar. So for example, on this last event, I want to make sure that it's parsing and mapping properly. As you can see, it says parsed and mapped, and that's one of the great things about QRadar is that it recognizes well over 300 different types of devices automatically, so that once you set up syslog, it'll actually parse and map properly so that all of the information can be put in the right fields and then surgically take actions. For example, blocking an IP address, or for example, changing directory files or other firewall policies. You name what kind of security issues you want. QRadar has those templates built in. Now, we're back on the switch right now, and I just want to verify that it's actually sending messages. This is more for you because we've already seen those messages, but as you can see, there's a command about how you can confirm your syslog from the switch into QRadar or your SIEM or your Secure Incident Event Manager or Monitor. Now back in QRadar, I want to actually take some other actions when I notice some of these events. So the first thing I need to do here is we're actually going to double check those log sources I mentioned earlier. So you can see all the log sources that it actually is configured with. And for example, I'm going to click on that Brocade switch right now. And as you can see, we're all set. It actually understands. It understands not only the messages, but it's enabled. And now let's actually pull up all the events that it's seen so far. Now, what's important is we've seen these events, but we need to teach it what to do. Let's go to the rules now, and I'll show you about the rule that we created that shows off how to block the IP address. And again, this rule is documented in the Red Book or Red Paper. Feel free to download it, and we'll show a little bit of it in this video right now. So doing a filter on Brocade, you can actually see this Python script, which simply tells QRadar and the switch how to update the IP filter policy. So let's actually go into this rule a little bit more here. So if I actually bring this up by opening it up, you'll actually see a little bit more details on this particular rule. So I'm going to zoom in here. And as you can see, for this particular switch, look at the middle section here with the red dashes here. If all of a sudden we notice failed logins and a bunch of them in 5 minutes or less, and again, you can change any of these variables you want, then it's actually going to start doing something. Now, QRadar is so flexible that there's so many what-ifs that you can start doing here. That's what you see the plus signs up above, as well as any other groups that you want to do things. So you can start a chain reaction of a whole bunch of other downstream events once something is notified. So not only the severity, the credibility, the relevance, but in this case, execute a custom action. Of course, there's other things you can do as well. And there's a custom action down below underneath my cursor where it says block IP. And that script basically is what QRadar will then take all of its intelligence by saying, okay, this IP address is trying to get in. I'm going to update the IP filter policy on the FOSS switch with that IP address and then save it to that FOSS switch. That's what you're about to see in just a few seconds and what you saw earlier on the demo. Now, if you want to see where those actions are stored, you can click here, and there it is, the block IP script. And I'm actually going to bring it open. And by the way, if you want to take a look at the script, this is where you would actually browse and you can do more of it. But you can see where it's actually looking at that particular script, using those particular properties from the syslog file to then intelligently and surgically block attackers. Hey, thanks again for watching the video. Let me know if you have any questions.